Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. This is Doc Owen. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show. We are extremely glad that you joined us. I'm flying as a one-man band tonight for a couple of different reasons. So if you hear me hesitate or things get kind of hicky-jicky in terms of moving what you hear around into the proper slot and putting it on at the right time, etc., I hope you'll give me a break. I did this same routine, but it's been about 4 years. I now get a lot of help out of Ms. Surefire, who runs the controls, and all I got to do is stand up, listen, and jabber occasionally, so I forget how complicated this environment is. Uncle Bocce is celebrating a birthday today, and for some reason, he considered that to be a good excuse to not join us for the show. And I just have to talk to him about that later. And in San Antonio, Texas, which is the headquarters for our Hilltop podcast, we have a little routine around here that's an annual event that lasts for like 2 weeks or more called Fiesta. If you're slightly familiar with, let's say, Mardi Gras or other events like that around the country, Fiesta is that on steroids. It is huge and everywhere. And it's a big deal, and it's a really good endeavor because all of it is designed to support charities in and around town, and it's a lot of fun and for a good cause. Ms. Surefire has been doing Fiesta for several years, many years. So she is out fiestaing. It is her ironclad duty to maximize Fiesta opportunities as they occur during this 2-week period. So here I am. We're going to rebroadcast a show originally done in 2014 when we first went on the digital airwaves. Before we do that, I need to remind you that we are all over the social media as Doc Owen Show, DocOwenshow. We have a wonderful growing blog, DocOwenShow.com, and we have free apps. Stress the word free. Download them, use them for both iPhone and Android devices. It's a great way to listen to the show, and you have access to the entire history of the show if you want to root around in there and find different topics that were current at the time. Tonight's show, was, as I said, was originally broadcast in 14. It was the second show we ever did on the digital airwaves. The title of it was History as Life in the 60's, and this one is the same, just with the remix added. There was one thing that started occurring in the 60's that I remember distinctly saying was not going to end well, and I really kind of bowed up at it. I didn't like it at the time, and I like it even less now. It's expressed in a poem done by a guy that we called the Duke, Mr. John Wayne. So if you will, listen to Mr. Wayne as he expresses something that started in the 60's.
The hyphen, Webster's dictionary defines, is a symbol used to divide a compound word or a single word. So it seems to me that when a man calls himself an Afro-American, a Mexican-American, Italian-American, an Irish-American, Jewish-American, what he's saying is, I'm a divided American. Well, we all came from other places, different creeds, different races, to form a nation, to become as one. Yet look at the harm a line has done. A simple little line, and yet as divisive as a line can get. A crooked cross the Nazis flew, and the Russian hammer and sickle, too. Time bombs in the lives of man. But none of these could ever fan the flames of hatred faster than the hyphen. The Russian hammer built a wall that locks men's hearts from freedom's call. The crooked cross flew overhead above 20 million tragic dead. Among them, men from this great nation who died for freedom's preservation. A hyphen is a line that's small. It can be a bridge or be a wall. A bridge can save you lots of time. A wall you always have to climb. The road to liberty lies true. The hyphen's use is up to you. Used as a bridge, it can span all the differences of man. Being free in mind and soul should be our most important goal. If you use the hyphen as a wall, you'll make your life mean and small. An American is a special breed whose people came to her in need. They came to her that they might find a world where they'd have peace of mind, where men are equal, and something more, stand taller than they stood before. So you be wise in your decision, and that little line won't cause division. Let's join hands with one another, for in this land each man's your brother. United we stand, divided we fall. We're Americans, and that says it all.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne. John Wayne, I will remind you about the hyphen with a song by a group that we're extremely fond of. Without much further ado, listen to the rebroadcast of our original show, History of Life in the 60s. Enjoy. Howdy, folks. This is Doc Owen. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show on Spreaker.com. We are absolutely glad to have you. As of airtime, just to tell you, we had 385 followers. Airtime last week for our first show, we had 97 followers. So that should be some indication to you of the power of the digital universe and the ability to spread the word. We're very impressed. We're very flattered and hope we can continue to grow that number. That means that our message is getting out there, being received, and hopefully being appreciated. So this is our second week into the digital world coming out of the AM arena, and we are continually impressed, excited, and very enthusiastic about what we've done. So I hope you'll stay with us. One bit of disappointing news for my regular listeners. It seems we've got week number 2 without the response of a major U.S. corporation to activate our phone service. You know, I called them this afternoon. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty. Let's just say that we are stuck behind a business process that is completely untouched by human hands because they could not connect me with the department that takes care of what we needed to take care of so that I could talk to somebody. A little bit frustrating. I miss receiving your calls on one side of the ledger because it energizes me. I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy listening to you. And I'm sure the rest of the audience does too. However, not going to be the case. The upside is we're having a rather uncharacteristically cold, nasty night tonight at the home of the Hilltop Podcasters. So my studio engineer could not make it to the studio, which means I'm playing one-man band again. And that means, you know, if you picture the guy that has the cymbals between his knees and his foot's beating on the drum and he's playing the banjo and he's doing the harmonica with his mouth and somehow, I don't know, have a clue how they do it, but it winds up making music. hopefully we'll be able to do the same thing, because that's exactly where I am in this process. I'm playing one-man band tonight, so I'll try to keep my eye on the ball and stay focused. We're using all sorts of digital media to get the word out there. We've got a Facebook page. I did not post a question for the evening just because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do anything about it, doing the show all by myself. We're on Facebook. We have a blog. I have a Twitter account. There's a YouTube channel, and we are taping the show tonight to put out on YouTube, see how that works. And I have an email account. Facebook, blog, Twitter are all Doc Owen Show, DOCOWENSHOW, exactly how you found us on Spreaker.com. The YouTube channel is also Doc Owen Show. My email address is doc@docowenshow.com. So we're certainly available, easy to reach, and look forward to you participating and throwing in your questions, etc. If you go looking for us, I recommend something I learned this past week. Everybody tells you to Google it and find it. I'm going to tell you to use startpage.com, STARTPAGE.com. That's somebody that does not save or put algorithms in, or they do not record your IP address. In other words, the rest of the world is not prone to know what you've been looking for. So just a word of advice, a word of caution, a new piece of information out there. We're going to change the format of the show tonight. As we move along down the digital channel, it is very different from the AM world. We're hoping for approval by iHeartRadio /talk any day now. We've met all the qualifications, and so as soon as we get that, we'll be out there on the iHeart channel. For now, it's Spreaker.com, and they do a fabulous job. It just you have to have Spreaker loaded on your computer or your smartphone, but it's certainly available. And what the reason I bring that up is because that's driving one of the changes in the format. In the past, we've always done somewhat local news, somewhat local information. We've always focused on connecting the dots from national events and national activities down to the local level. We've given local sort of activities and meetings and that sort of thing that you can go to. I'm going to have to push that back on you, and tell you that if you are not in our headquarters city, which is San Antonio, Texas, even if you're in San Antonio, you're going to need to go out, and I'm going to recommend that you find your local Tea Party website, your local Tea Party Activity Center, and we'll get into that more later on in the show. Just be calm. But go out and find your local Tea Party Information Center, and they will post where all the group meetings, what activities are going on, what they're sponsoring, what they're connected with. It is a group of highly active individuals from coast to coast. So go out there and find them, and there'll be another reason to do that as we move later on into the show. We are still going to be about connecting the dots. However, we're going to start focusing on connecting the dots on a younger basis. As you know, I am highly motivated into what I call the youth movement. And that is reaching out to what a lot of the medium calls millennials. I really don't like to classify people into groups. So I will just, standard groups, because that has a tendency to label things that you may or may not understand, such as the Tea Party. So we'll get into that in a minute so that everybody understands where I'm coming from. The youth movement that I'm going after is somewhere currently around the ages of 16 to 26. Okay. So now we've established that. Why is that important? Because in 2016, the youngest of that group will be able to vote. They are going to need
all of the information they can get. In addition, this is where the phone calls come in and the Facebook page comes in and the Twitter and all the other digital social media access that I have as Doc Owen Show. In addition to that age group needing information, those of us who are activists also need information. Because if we're going to work, if we're going to go out there and beat the bushes, if we're going to do what we know how to do, we need to know what you think. We need to know if we're doing the right thing, if we're exerting our energies in the right direction, or are we wasting our time and you would prefer that we concentrate on something else. This has got to be a joint effort. So all the way from a current age of 16 to 96, all across that age spectrum, we've all got to be rowing this boat in the same direction. And it has very little to do with what you might see in the mainstream media. It has very little to do with all of the emotional things the ideological things that they would like for us to get in front of. I go back to a conversation I had with a senior in high school on my AM radio show. If you go out and look at my podcast, you'll see it posted as a conversation with Riley Zander. Young Mr. Zander pointed something out to me that was very important. The thing that is the most frustrating to the young people, I would guess, is the divisiveness that they see between the Republicans, the Democrats, the Tea Party, the this, the that, is all the divisiveness, all of the bickering, all of the back and forth about whose fault it was and who's to blame and yada, yada, yada. I don't blame them one iota. They're absolutely correct. Those of us who appear to be in the driver's seat, the older crowd, we need to listen to that advice coming from them. Now, don't misunderstand me. That doesn't necessarily mean compromise, which is a favorite term nowadays. I've been saying something that's a quote from a fellow by the name of Woodrow Wilson. Not that I liked his politics, nor the reason he was giving it, but the quote is appropriate. Mr. Wilson said that occasionally, I may be paraphrasing here, but he said occasionally leaders must throw off the harness of compromise. The harness of compromise. In other words, if you're going to be a leader, you absolutely have to take a hit every once in a while if you're going to stand firm on your convictions. That's what leadership is about, is standing firm on your convictions. Some folks call it having a high degree of integrity. Both are referring to exactly the same thing. Let's get back to the youth movement. Let's get back to why I picked that. I mean, not necessarily why I picked the 16 to 26. I've already told you that. But where I want to take you is, and what we're going to do tonight is, to that group, my life is history. In other words, when you talk to them about events of, and tonight I'm going to pick the 1960s, that's history. Sorry, I don't view it as history because it was my life. So it's very much current information and current things that happen that rattle around in my head when I go through major events that this group considers history. So what I want to do is help everyone understand that if we take a major event that everyone in that age group was alive for, That would be September the 11th, 2001. I remember I arrived at the office. I was traveling as this event was going on. I arrived at the office, and there was no one there. There was no one at the front desk. There was no one in the offices. Found out they were all huddled around in the break room watching the television. Yes, it was color. And I arrived just in time to see the second plane hit the World Trade Center. I remember the first words out of my mouth. I remember it well because I've replayed it over and over, just like a lot of other people have. Life in America just changed forever. I knew it when it happened. And sure enough, a lot of the things that we are seeing today that are in the news, that are aggravating, like the NSA, like the quagmire that we're in the Middle East, like, Fast and Furious, like, not necessarily like the IRS scandal, but a lot of things that we're in the middle of today are a direct result of our reaction to the events of September the 11th, 2001. We were told, and rightfully so, I think, that we were going to have to lose some of our personal freedoms in order to get a handle on our personal protection. Okay, I got that. And up to a certain point, I was okay with that. But what's happening now is the concerns of the people, and there were quite a few, that protested the formation of the Department of Homeland Security, the consolidation, the humongous growth that we have seen in the federal government's intervention in our lives is a direct result of protecting us. We all know in business, in life, in everything, that there's a pendulum, and you've heard the phrase, the pendulum swings both ways. Well, the pendulum swinging from our totally free and open society that I grew up in has now, what you're hearing and seeing in the protests and the complaints is that a lot of people believe that the pendulum has swung too far. In other words, enough is enough. What everybody needs to understand, and I think that the point of that was on September the 11th, 2001, the folks that I want to hear from, that I'm talking to, that I'm trying to come to terms with, were anywhere from the ages of 3 to 13. Well, certainly I have no clue of what I was doing at 3 years old. But I do have a real good understanding of what I was doing at 13 years old. And so it was very, very different than what my younger brother was doing when he was 13 years old. I'll tell you why in a minute. So those of us that are out there that remember the 60s as real life, certainly from that point forward, that remember the 50s as real life, think about what's going on in the heads of the young folks who had this aura of September the 11th, 2001 over them during the time they were growing up for the last 13 to 14 years, or 12 to 13 years. It'll change your view. It'll change your perspective. I know that it did mine. So in an effort to help each other understand kind of where we're coming from, because you hear and see a lot in the mainstream media, you hear and see a lot, no matter what you're looking at, watching or reading about the Tea Party and the conservatives and the destruction of the Republican Party or the destruction of America or whatever. I've been very active in the Tea Party. I'm here to tell you firsthand knowledge and doing what I do for a living, as well as the radio show, as well as what I do for enjoyment and have all my life, honesty and integrity is a hallmark. It'll occasionally get you in trouble. It won't really get you in trouble. It might get you in a little heated situation, but nonetheless, that's the way it is, and you become known for that. So I'm just asking you for now, and I'm going to tell you how I'm going to prove it to you a little bit later in this show, to trust me on the fact that the Tea Party and individuals involved in the Tea Party have absolutely nothing but the best interest of the United States and its citizens in mind when they do what they do. They are probably your grandparents, possibly your parents. Maybe the longer shot is that some of you are youthful members of a young Tea Party type organization. I think those are rare. I think as a current day 16 to 26 year old, you owe it to yourself to get your own firsthand knowledge of who these people are. They are dedicated to, as closely as possible, because the world has changed. It is much more dangerous. There are evil people in the world who do have access to data and information and firearms and bombs and all kinds of nasty stuff. And they don't think like we do. They don't respect the same things that we do. And we can't always, on an individual basis, protect ourselves from them. So we do need some help. In other words, the reaction from the federal government to protect us after September the 11th was a good reaction. Has it gone too far? Have we lost too many of our freedoms? A lot of people think so. I happen to be one of them. I would submit to you that the best way for us to be protected is to protect each other, is to stay diligent, pay attention, be conscious of what's going on around you. And if you see something that's not right, do something about it. Don't ignore it. So let's get back to the Tea Party and why I think the 16 to 26 folks should go not just to one Tea Party meeting, but 2 or 3 in a row. You can find them. They're everywhere. You can, like I said, you can go to startpage.com, do a search on it in your location. I guarantee you'll come up with a website, you'll come up with a blog, you'll come up with something that'll help you very easily track them down. If you can't, ask your grandparents. ask your parents. They'll point you in the right direction. And I'll remind you at the end of the show, but when you get there, tell them the Doc Owen Show sent you. At this point in our nationwide digital broadcasting, week 2, they probably won't have a clue who you're talking about. You can tell them to start page it and find me. Or you can tell them how you found me. It is a conservative bunch. Conservative in the sense that they believe in the Constitution. Conservative in the sense that they believe in a free enterprise, open market system. Conservative in the sense that they think the federal debt is completely out of control and that our representatives are not representing us properly, which is much less skin off of some. Think about this. It's much less skin off the teeth of a 60-year-old than it is a 16-year-old. You guys are the ones that are going to have to pay it back. It's going to cost you, for the first time in our lives, there's a very distinct threat that we may not be able to leave this earth having given you a better way of life than we had given to us by our parents. There's a very distinct threat that might not happen. I hope you can understand why that age group is so adamant about how we feel. It's not right. It's absolutely not the American way. Every generation is supposed to do better. And there is no excuse for that not being true. Sorry, there is no excuse for that not being true. I've thought about it and thought about it. I'm here to tell you, there's too much opportunity in the world for that not to be true. The only reason it would not be true is if it is interfered with by, at this point, what I would consider to be an overly aggressive government at all levels. Federal, some states, municipal. They're grinding us down in the name of protecting us. And I don't think so. So let's I've sort of set the stage about the age group. So let me take some time, if you will, to walk you through where I was. A lot of people like me, but what I can give you is personal experience. And I'm going to start with the 1960s. If I start with the year 1960, I was 15 years old. Okay, so I was right in this age group that I'm talking to when 9/11 happened. All right? When I was in 1960, and actually a little bit before, I was writing my congressman for an appointment to the United States Naval Academy. I wanted to go to Navy. There are a number of reasons why. Some important, some not. But that was where I wanted to go to college. I had my mind set on it. I was aggressive about it ever since the 7th grade. I did my level best to get there. And I did. So let me dive into the 60s, and I'll tell you, first of all, I got all of this information from a website called America's Best History. Really a kind of a valuable tool just to refresh my memory and make sure that I hadn't misconstrued what happened in the 60s. And it breaks it apart into decades. So it'll give you this we'll go 1960 through 69 and, see how far we get. We're about a half an hour in. I try to keep this to 45 minutes. So we've got 15 minutes left. That's fine. The 1960s, according to this website, and according to most, was known as the era of civil rights and turmoil. Certainly you will remember all of that. The first event I want to remind you of is on July the 4th in 1960, the 50-star flag of the U.S. debuted in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It reflected the admission of Hawaii. It reflected the admission of Hawaii to the Union in 1959. Alaska had been admitted just prior to that. The reason I remember that is because I was growing up in Texas, and all of a sudden we were no longer the biggest state in the Union. So, we always did then and probably still do now hope that some of Alaska would melt. Nothing personal. I like a lot of people up there. In November of 1960, Senator John F. Kennedy became president of the United States. Mr. Kennedy was a Democrat. I'd like to ask you folks to ask yourselves a question. Would the Democrat of today express the same opinion and the same direction that Mr. Kennedy is very famous for having said? He said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." I would submit to you that today's Democrat has turned that exactly backwards. That leads to a problem. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. That's how we all get ahead. That's what I grew up with. That's what a lot of people grew up with. That's what a lot of people in the Tea Party grew up with. We want to know what we can do for our country, and that's what they're doing. And you 16 to 26-year-olds need to learn that. You need to help us with that. Okay? 1961, the Berlin Wall was constructed. Can you believe that? 16 years after the war ended, the Berlin Wall was constructed. That wasn't right. February of 62, Kennedy admitted that the military advisors already in Vietnam would engage the enemy if fired upon. 62. October of 62, James Meredith entered the University of Mississippi as the first black student at a major university. Wow. Think about that. There's a lot of people on this earth, a lot of people fighting for the good of this country that remember that happening. And they remember, and I'll tell you what, they remember that it's a very good thing. I guess I should add that. They remember that it's a very good thing. And I'll give you, I graduated from high school in May of 1963. So we just hit October of 62. I'm pretty well focused on what's going on in my life as a high school senior, and I'm about to enter the Naval Academy, which has been a 6-year dream and fight. And I reported to Navy about 10 days after I graduated from high school. So in June of 63, I went in. I was fortunate enough to be a yell leader at Navy. I was fortunate enough to be good friends with Roger Staubach the year that he won the Heisman Trophy. That was my freshman year at Navy. And so I was 18 years old. 18 years old. And I was right where I thought I was supposed to be. Well, in August of 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. made his speech of I Have a Dream at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington. And as you know, November the 22nd, 1963, John F. Kennedy was shot in Dallas, Texas. I'll never, ever forget that. And there's a lot of people fighting for this country that won't forget it either. That was not a good thing. That was the first time since World War II. Now, see, that was the first time since World War II that the Army-Navy game was postponed for a week because Mr. Kennedy was assassinated. I was coming back from my fourth period class trying to make, muster for lunch at the academy when they made the announcement. Man, kind of like what 9/11 did to some folks. In August of 64, the summer after my freshman year in college, the Gulf of Tonkin happened, and we were very officially and very heavily engaged in Vietnam. In the August of 65, the Voting Rights Act of 65 was signed into law by then President Lyndon B. Johnson. And I'd like for you to note there were two significant pieces to that legislation. One of them, think about this, they outlawed the requirement of potential voters to take a literacy test. Think about that. Up until 1965, a voter in the United States needed to be able to read. That's not the case anymore. The second one was that the provision of federal registration of voters in areas with less than 50% of voters, of registered voters, was no longer required. In October of 65 was the first public burning of a draft card as a protest of Vietnam. In November of 1966, the first black United States senator in 85 years, Honorable Mr. Edward Brooke, was elected to Congress. Brooke was a Republican. In July of 67, black riots broke out all across the United States. In the summer of 1967, I got caught in one of those black riots. I was a traveling salesman calling on one of my customers in, of all places, Topeka, Kansas. And I heard what sounded like a huge storm outside the hotel where I was staying. I thought I had been caught up in one of these world famous Kansas twisters. So I went to the window and realized I was in a different kind of Kansas twister. I was in the middle of a race riot. Luckily, that's as close as it got to me was the sound. But it certainly had a long-reaching impact. In October of 67, Thurgood Marshall was sworn in as the first black Supreme Court justice. This is not history to a lot of people. This is life. That was followed in 1968 in April of the assassination of Martin Luther King. And that was quickly followed in June with the assassination of presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's younger brother. So that's 1968, folks. That's less than 5 years after I was 18 years old starting at the Naval Academy. I didn't tell you earlier why I wanted to go to Navy. I wanted to go to Navy because I wanted to be a senator from the state of Texas. And I thought that the Naval Academy would be excellent training to be in that kind of a leadership role. I was right, I think. I learned a lot. But right there in that short span of time, you've had JFK, three major leaders in our society of the time. John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. all shot. Needless to say, I started giving some serious thought to my career choices. The last couple of events that occurred in 1969, yeah, this is kind of funny. November of 1969, the Internet, at the time called the ARPANET, was seeing its initial development. It was invented by the Advanced Research Projects Agency in the United States Department of Defense. As most of you know, the Department of Defense is responsible for funding a lot of the technology that private enterprise, free enterprise, then takes to market and figures out how to make a buck off of it. So we're coming up on our 42, 43 minute mark. I try to close these out right under the 45 minute mark. So in that took us through the 60s. Next week, I'm probably going to continue to go forward through the 70s because I'm not trying to bore you with at all with. I'm trying to give everybody some perspective, give my generation some perspective, helping you think back through, and give the youths a perspective of why we feel so strongly at this point in time of turning over a better United States to you than it appears we're going to be able to if folks continue taking the direction that they're taking, and that is spending money that they don't have, flaunting, ignoring, or pushing the limits of the Constitution, which was absolutely not written to be a changeable, modifiable document as we go along. It was probably the absolute greatest thing ever written, and that's what it was the basis for the wonderful country that we are fighting for, that we still have, and that an awful lot of the rest of the world wants to take down out of sheer jealousy and their inability to do it themselves. So I'm going to close out with another little 25-second piece, and then I will say goodnight. So take a listen to this, if you will. Find that one in the calling. This is Doc Owen. It's been a pleasure.
So that was a show from the archives. It was okay, considering what we've learned and the professional team that we've assembled in the time since. We played for you at the beginning a poem done by John Wayne about the hyphen. I'd now like to give you a little current day song. Lead singer is a friend of ours by the name of Dave Bray. You can find him, Dave Bray USA. He's one of the finest patriotic artists that is out there.
Alarm goes off and I'm rolling out of bed. I turn the TV on to wake up and clear my head. I catch the news in time to view another stirring of the pot. Talks of inequality and what people need, forgetting what they got. But in these times of opposition, prejudice runs deep. The fighting us by heritage is all they ever preach. They tell us that they really care. To them it's just a game. 'Cause we were all Americans. less about your name. 'Cause we were all Americans before the hyphens came. Somewhere down along the line, someone had a great idea. Divide us up our heritage and profit from the fear. But growing up a while back, before the racial trends, whether immigrant, white or black, we just called each other friends. And if we spoke an extra language, it was just another way to pledge allegiance to the flag. God bless the USA. They tell us that they really care. To them it's just a game. 'Cause we were all Americans before the hyphens came. People cared about who you were and less about your name. 'Cause we were all Americans before the hyphens came.
I hope you enjoyed this evening's show as much as we did, as I did. It was good to know that we're still connecting the dots and delivering the same sort of message, crystal clear, 4 years later. We still have our focus, only now instead of being excited about 390-something listeners, we're in the tens of thousands and we're international. It's been a fun ride, and we absolutely expect it to continue and grow. Thanks for joining us. Tell your friends, spread the word, do what you can do to join the mission of keeping this country what it was intended to be. We sincerely appreciate it. Don't know how else to tell you. Front row. Time to go. You have been listening to the Doc Owen Show. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Now go out there this week and take care, pay attention, and God bless.
Bye-bye, folks. God bless.